A young boy feels unloved by his mother, so he leaves home to go and live with his uncle in a big city. Will he finally be accepted, or will he have to learn some difficult lessons about life? Hello and welcome to the channel. This is Literature Simplified, where I explain English literature in simple English. Today we will study a short story called Homecoming by the renowned Rabindranath Tagore. Talking about him in just one or two lines would be a great injustice because his talent, knowledge, and learning are vast. He is considered the greatest writer in Indian literature. He wrote about a wide variety of topics, but many of his short stories focused on the lives, sorrows, and joys of ordinary villagers and children. This is one such story. Now, without any further delay, let's go through the story in detail. Phatik Chakravarti was the ringleader among the boys of the village. A new mischief got into his head. So we are here introduced to Phatik Chakravarti. He is the leader of a group of village boys. The word ringleader suggests that he is the one who usually comes up with ideas and influences the other boys. One day he thinks of a new mischief. There was a heavy log lying on the mud flat of the river, waiting to be shaped into a mast for a boat. He decided that they should all work together to shift the log by main force from its place and roll it away. The owner of the log would be angry and surprised, and they would all enjoy the fun. So, now what was this plan or this mischief he had thought of? He had seen a large log lying on the riverbed, which is meant to be used later for making a boat mast. A mast is a tall pole on which the sails of the boat are fixed. So instead of leaving it alone, he suggests that all the boys should work together and roll it away from its place, just for fun, so that the owner of the log will be confused and angry and the boys will enjoy annoying him. Everyone seconded the proposal and it was carried unanimously. So that means the other boys immediately agreed, and this shows that Phatik has a strong influence over them. They are always eager to join in his plans without questioning him. But just as the fun was about to begin, Makhan, Phatik's younger brother, sauntered up and sat down on the log in front of them all without a word. The boys were puzzled for a moment. So now, just as they were about to put their plan into action, Makhan, who is Phatik's younger brother, walks in and silently sits down on the log. He doesn't say anything or react to the boys at all. His calm and indifferent behavior confuses them for a moment. He was pushed rather timidly by one of the boys and told to get up, but he remained quite unconcerned. He appeared like a young philosopher meditating on the futility of games. Phatik was furious. So one of the boys, Phatik's friends, tries to push Makhan off the log but does so very hesitantly. So Makhan, he doesn't move. He remains completely unconcerned. The description comparing him to a philosopher suggests that he is behaving as if he is above all this childish play that his brother and his friends are involved in, as though he is calmly observing them rather than participating. This irritates Phatik because his authority is being challenged by his younger brother in front of all the other boys. Makhan, he cried, if you don't get down this minute, I'll thrash you. Makhan only moved to a more comfortable position. So Phatik now loses his patience and directly threatens Makhan, saying, get down or he will beat him. However, Makhan does not take him seriously. Instead of getting up, he just adjusts himself to sit more comfortably. Now, this behavior tells you something, that Makhan has some kind of ace up his sleeve. He's not afraid because either one, he thinks that his brother will not hit him, or that he has a trump card. He can always go running to his mother and complain, and she will take his side. So perhaps this is why he's not bothered. Now, if Phatik was to keep his regal dignity before the public, it was clear he ought to carry out his threat. But his courage failed him at the crisis. So now he had threatened to beat his brother. But now he faced a problem. Since he had made a public threat, he was expected to act on it, otherwise, he will lose his authority in front of the other boys. But when the moment comes to actually carry out his threat, he does not actually dare to do that, to beat his brother. His fertile brain, however, rapidly seized upon a new maneuver which would discomfort his brother and afford his followers an added amusement. So, all this line means is that he quickly thinks of another plan, one that will both deal with Makhan and also entertain the other boys. He gave the word of command to roll the log and Makhan over together. Makhan heard the order and made it a point of honor to stick on. So, what does he do? He tells the boys to roll the log even though Makhan is still sitting on it. He says, roll it along with Makhan. So, Makhan hears this, but he chooses to still stay where he is, stuck on that log, because now he's also treating it as a matter of pride and he's refusing to give in. But he overlooked the fact, like those who attempt earthly fame in other matters, that there was peril in it. So, this means that he does not realize the danger involved in this decision. The comparison to people chasing fame suggests that in trying to prove something, one usually overlooks risks associated with an action. The boys began to heave at the log with all their might, calling out, "One, two, three, go!" At the word go, the log went, and with it, Makhan's philosophy, glory, and all. So the boys then begin to push the log with full force, shouting together to coordinate their effort. And as soon as they push, the log moves and Makhan is carried along with it. His calm attitude and his sense of control and everything disappear instantly. All the other boys shouted themselves hoarse with delight. But Phatik was a little frightened. He knew what was coming. All the boys are happy because of what has happened and they are all screaming and shouting and they are all excited. But Phatik is not doing that because he knows what is going to happen and that makes him slightly afraid. And sure enough, Makhan rose from Mother Earth, blind as fate and screaming like the Furies. He rushed at Phatik and scratched his face and beat him and kicked him and then went home crying. The first act of the drama was over. So all Makhan's calmness has disappeared. He gets up from the ground. He's extremely angry and upset. He rushes towards Phatik. He kicks him and he scratches him, hits him, and then he runs home crying. This line, the first act of the drama was over, suggests that this is not over, that there's still more to come. Blind as fate refers to the idea that fate or destiny is often described as blind, meaning it does not see or care about who is right or wrong. It just acts. So here Makhan is so angry that he is not thinking or seeing clearly. He is acting blindly, driven purely by emotion. Screaming like the Furies refers to the Furies from Greek mythology. The Furies were terrifying female spirits who punished people for wrongdoing. They were known for being furious and loud and screaming in anger. So, when the author says that Makhan was screaming like the Furies, it means that he was shouting very loudly, he was full of rage, and he almost seemed uncontrollable. Phatik wiped his face and sat down on the edge of a sunken barge on the river bank and began to chew a piece of grass. So, after all this excitement and drama, he quietly wiped his face and he sat down by the river, chewing a piece of grass. This shows that his mood has suddenly changed from excited and playful. Now he's turned very subdued and very thoughtful. A boat came up to the landing, and a middle aged man with grey hair and dark mustache stepped on the shore. A new character is introduced to us, a middle aged man who arrives by boat. His appearance is described briefly, which suggests that he is somebody important, perhaps. He saw the boy sitting there doing nothing and asked him where the Chakravartis lived. Phatik went on chewing the grass and said, "Over there," but it was quite impossible to tell where he pointed. So this middle-aged man, he sees Phatik sitting idly and asks him where the Chakravartis live. Phatik's behavior here is quite rude and careless. He continues chewing the grass and he gives a vague reply, pointing in a direction that is not clear at all. The stranger asks him again. He swung his legs to and fro on the side of the barge and said, "Go and find out," and continued to chew the grass as before. So now, even when the man asks again, Phatik does not take him seriously. He swings his legs casually and tells him, "Go and find out," without offering any real help. This shows Phatik's careless and slightly rebellious nature. He does not feel the need to show respect to a stranger who is older than him. But now a servant came down from the house and told Phatik his mother wanted him. Phatik refused to move, but the servant was the master on this occasion. He took Phatik up roughly and carried him, kicking and struggling in impotent rage. So, after all this incident, when he spoke to that middle aged man, suddenly the servant came from his house, calling to Phatik and saying that his mother was calling him. Now, Phatik refuses to go, showing his stubbornness, but also perhaps because he knows what's going to happen to him once he reaches home. But the servant does not tolerate this behavior and he physically picks up Phatik and carries him home despite his resistance and his stubbornness. This shows that the servant is used to dealing with these kinds of situations where Phatik is concerned. When Phatik came into the house, his mother saw him. She called out angrily, "So you have been hitting Makhan again?" So when he reaches home, his mother immediately accuses him of hitting Makhan again. Notice that she does not ask what happened, she assumes that Phatik is at fault. This shows that she already has a fixed opinion about him. Phatik answered indignantly, "No, I haven't. Who told you that?" His mother shouted, "Don't tell lies. You have." So Phatik strongly denies the accusation that he hit his brother. He is clearly upset and he insists that he did not hit Makhan. However, his mother refuses to believe him and directly calls him a liar. Phatik said suddenly, "I tell you, I haven't. You ask Makhan." But Makhan thought it best to stick to his previous statement. He said, "Yes, mother, Phatik did hit me." So at this point, Phatik asks her to confirm the truth from Makhan, but Makhan chooses to repeat his earlier version and says that Phatik did hit him. He knows that it's untrue, but he says it anyway. Because now he's already lied once and he doesn't want to go back on his lie because his mother will get angry at him. So he continues with his lie. Phatik's patience was already exhausted. He could not hear this injustice. He rushed at Makhan and hammered him with blows. "Take that," he cried, and that for telling lies." So now Phatik loses his patience completely. He cannot tolerate the false accusation any longer. And in his anger, he attacks Makhan, hitting him repeatedly. His mother took Makhan's side in a moment and pulled Phatik away, beating him with her hands. When Phatik pushed her aside, she shouted out, "What, you little villain? Would you hit your own mother?" So his mother immediately takes Makhan's side and pulls Phatik away. She even beats Phatik herself. But when Phatik tries to push her away in frustration, she reacts strongly and accuses him of being disrespectful, asking how he can raise his hands against his own mother. It was just at this critical juncture that the grey haired stranger arrived. He asked what the matter was. Phatik looked sheepish and ashamed. So at this moment, the grey haired man from earlier who had met Phatik near the boat, he arrives over there and he asks what is happening and he brings a stop to all this argument. So Phatik now feels embarrassed and ashamed and his earlier boldness disappears and he becomes quiet. But when his mother stepped back and looked at the stranger, her anger was changed to surprise. For she recognized her brother and cried, "Why, Dada, where have you come from?" As she said these words, she bowed to the ground and touched his feet. The mother then recognizes this stranger that it is her brother. Her reaction changes instantly from anger to surprise and respect. She greets him warmly and bows down to touch his feet, which is a traditional gesture of respect since he is her elder brother. Her brother had gone away soon after she had married and he had started business in Bombay. His sister had lost her husband while he was in Bombay. So here we learn more about the stranger. He is Bishambar, Phatik's maternal uncle, means his mother's brother. He had left home long ago, soon after his sister had got married, and he had been living in Bombay, where he had started a business. And while he was away, his sister had become a widow. Bishambar had now come back to Calcutta and had at once made inquiries about his sister. He had then hastened to see her as soon as he found out where she was. So now Bishambar, her elder brother, he has returned to Calcutta from Bombay, and immediately he made an effort to find out where she lived, and as soon as he could locate her, he came to meet her. The next few days were full of rejoicing. The brother asked after the education of the two boys. So the next few days are described as joyful, showing that there is genuine affection between the siblings, the brother and the sister. After settling in, he naturally asks about the two boys and their education, which shows that he's concerned and he feels a sense of responsibility. He was told by his sister that Phatik was a perpetual nuisance. He was lazy, disobedient, and wild. But Makhan was as good as gold, as quiet as a lamb, and very fond of reading. Now we see how Phatik is viewed within his own home. His mother describes him very negatively. She calls him troublesome, lazy, disobedient, and wild. But she praises Makhan, saying that he is quiet, well behaved, and fond of reading. This shows a clear bias in her attitude towards her sons. She has a negative bias towards Phatik and she thinks very positively of Makhan. Bishambar kindly offered to take Phatik off his sister's hands and educate him with his own children in Calcutta. The widowed mother readily agreed. When his uncle asked Phatik if he would like to go to Calcutta with him, his joy knew no bounds, and he said, "Oh, yes, uncle," in a way that made it quite clear that he meant it. So Bishambar then he offers to take Phatik with him to Calcutta and educate him along with his own children. The mother agrees immediately, which suggests that she sees this as a solution to her problem. And it would also be a big help to her because she's a widow. She has nobody to support her. And since her brother has kindly offered, she immediately agrees. When Fatik is asked whether he wants to go, he is extremely happy and agrees at once. His excitement shows that he is eager for a change and perhaps he wants to escape from the current situation at home. It was an immense relief to the mother to get rid of Fatik. She had a prejudice against the boy and no love was lost between the two brothers. So now we are told about the mother's feelings. It is described as a relief for her to send Fatik away. She already has a prejudice against him, meaning that she has formed a fixed negative opinion about him. She was in daily fear that he would either drown Makhan someday in the river or break his head in a fight or run him into some danger or other. At the same time, she was somewhat distressed to see Fatik's extreme eagerness to get away. So his mother is constantly worried that he might harm Makhan in some way, either through carelessness or mischief. At the same time, she feels slightly uneasy and perhaps hurt seeing how eager Fatik is to leave. Fatik, as soon as all was settled, kept asking his uncle every minute when they were to start. So Fatik, on the other hand, he's full of excitement. Once everything is decided, he keeps asking when they will leave, showing how impatient and eager he is for this new journey. He was on pins and needles all day long with excitement and lay awake most of the night. So Fatik's excitement continues. The phrase on pins and needles shows that he is restless and unable to sit still because of his anticipation, eagerness to go. He is so excited that he cannot even sleep properly at night. He bequeaths to Makhan in perpetuity his fishing rod, his big kite, and his marbles. So before leaving, he gave away his favorite belongings, his fishing rod, his kite, and his marbles to Makhan. Indeed, at this time of departure, his generosity towards Makhan was unbounded. So this is important because earlier there was a conflict between the two brothers, but now Fatik shows generosity and affection. His behavior at this moment suggests a softer, more emotional side of his character. When they reached Calcutta, Phatik made the acquaintance of his aunt for the first time. So finally, they reach Calcutta and Phatik meets his aunt for the first time in his life. She was by no means pleased with this unnecessary addition to her family. She found her own three boys quite enough to manage without taking anyone else. And to bring a village lad of 14 into their midst was terribly upsetting. Bishambar should have really thought twice before committing such an indiscretion. Now we are introduced to the aunt, and her reaction is very different. She is not happy about Phatik coming to live with them. She feels that she has already enough responsibility with her own children. To her, Phatik is an unnecessary burden. She is especially concerned that he is a village boy, which suggests that she feels that he will not fit into their more urban and disciplined household, to their city life. In this world of human affairs, there is no worse nuisance than a boy at the age of 14. So Tagore then makes a comment about how a boy of 14 can be very troublesome. This reflects how people often see boys of that age as restless, difficult, and hard to manage. He is neither ornamental nor useful. It is impossible to shower affection on him as on a little boy, and he is always getting in the way. So, the writer is saying that a boy of 14 is described as neither useful nor attractive. He is no longer a small child, so people do not feel the same affection towards him, but he is also not yet an adult who can be taken seriously. Because of this, he often feels like he's in the way of others. If he talks with a childish lisp, he is called a baby, and if he answers in a grown up way, he is called impertinent. In fact, any talk at all from him is resented. So he's saying that if he behaves like a child, he is mocked for being immature. But if he tries to behave like an adult, he is criticized for being rude or overconfident. So whatever he does, he is judged negatively. Then he is at the unattractive growing age. He grows out of his clothes with indecent haste. His voice grows hoarse and breaks and quavers. His face grows suddenly angular and unsightly. So, this is the description of his physical changes that also reflect this awkward stage of growing up. His clothes no longer fit properly. His voice changes and his appearance becomes uneven. All this makes him seem more uncomfortable and unattractive, both to others and to himself. It is easy to excuse the shortcomings of early childhood, but it is hard to tolerate even unavoidable lapses in a boy of 14. So, when children are very young, their mistakes are easily forgiven. But at 14, even small faults are judged more strictly. The lad himself becomes painfully self conscious. When he talks with elderly people, he is either unduly forward or else so unduly shy that he appears ashamed of his very existence. So he's saying that this makes the boy very self conscious. He becomes overly aware of how others see him. When speaking to elders, he either becomes too bold or too shy. In both cases, he is misunderstood and criticized. Yet it is at this very age when, in his heart of hearts, a young lad most craves for recognition and love, and he becomes the devoted slave of anyone who showers him consideration. The writer is saying that at the same time, this is the very age when a boy deeply wants appreciation and affection. He is especially drawn towards anyone who shows him kindness or understanding. This creates a contrast. He needs love the most at this age but receives it the least. But none dare openly love him, for that would be regarded as undue indulgence and therefore bad for the boy. So people hesitate to show love to a boy of this age because they believe it will spoil him. They think strictness is necessary for discipline. So what with scolding and chiding, he becomes very much like a stray dog that has lost its master. So as a result, the boy is constantly scolded and corrected, and the comparison to a stray dog is very important Like a stray dog that has lost its owner, the boy feels lost, unwanted, and without a sense of belonging. For a boy of 14, his own home is the only paradise. To live in a strange house with strange people is little short of torture, while the height of bliss is to receive the kind looks of women and never to be slighted by them. So the writer is saying that for a 14-year-old boy, home is the only place where he feels truly happy and secure. Living in a strange house among unfamiliar people is extremely uncomfortable and painful. Even small gestures of kindness, especially from women in the household, mean a lot to him. At the same time, being ignored or insulted hurts him deeply. It was anguish to Phatik to be the unwelcome guest in his aunt's house, despised by this elderly woman and slighted on every occasion. So now we see how all this applies to Phatik. He feels constant discomfort in his aunt's house. He knows that he is not wanted there and that he is looked down upon. If she ever asked him to do anything for her, he would be so overjoyed that he would overdo it. And then she would tell him not to be so stupid, but to get on with his lessons. So, whenever his aunt asks him to do something, he becomes very eager to please her. He tries too hard, hoping to gain her approval. But instead of appreciating his efforts, she criticizes him and tells him to stop being foolish and to focus on his studies. The cramped atmosphere of neglect in his aunt's house oppressed Phatik so much that he felt that he could hardly breathe. So his aunt's behavior makes him feel even more rejected. The phrase cramped atmosphere of neglect shows how suffocating this environment is for him. It's not just physical space but emotional neglect that is also troubling him. He wanted to go out into the open country and fill his lungs and breathe freely, but there was no open country to go to. So he is now beginning to long for his village home. He misses the open spaces where he could move freely and feel at ease. Surrounded on all sides by Calcutta houses and walls, he would dream night after night of his village home and long to be back there. So now in contrast to his village home, the city feels closed and restricted and surrounded by buildings and walls. He has no place to escape or to relax, and because of this he starts dreaming about his village often. He remembered the glorious meadow where he used to fly his kite all day, the broad river banks where he would wander about the livelong day singing and shouting for joy, the narrow brook where he could go and dive and swim at any time he liked. So now Phatik is remembering the wide fields where he flew kites, the river banks where he spent his days freely, and the streams where he could swim whenever he wanted. These memories highlight the contrast between his happy, carefree life in the village and his unhappy, restricted life in the city. He is very homesick. He thought of his band of boy companions over whom he was despot, and above all, the memory of that tyrant mother of his who had such a prejudice against him occupied him day and night. So here we see how deeply Phatik begins to miss his old life. He remembers his group of friends in the village where he used to be the leader. There he had a sense of importance and belonging. But most of all, he kept thinking about his mother. Even though she was strict and often unfair to him, he still longs for her. This shows that his attachment to his mother is very strong, even if their relationship was not perfect. A kind of physical love like that of animals, a longing to be in the presence of the one who is loved, an inexpressible wistfulness during absence, a silent cry of the inmost heart for the mother, like the lowing of a calf in the twilight. This love, which was almost an animal instinct, agitated the shy, nervous, lean, uncouth, and ugly boy. This passage describes his feelings in a very powerful way. It compares his love to a natural, almost instinctive bond, like that between animals. Just as a calf cries out for its mother when it's separated, Phatik feels a deep, unspoken longing to be near his mother again. This emotion is not something he can explain in words, but it affects him constantly. No one could understand it, but it preyed upon his mind continually. So, no one around him understands what he is going through, but his loneliness continues to trouble him constantly. There was no more backward boy in the whole school than Phatik. He gaped and remained silent when the teacher asked him a question, and like an overladen ass, patiently suffered all the blows that came down on his back. So in school, he performs very poorly. He cannot answer questions and he often remains silent. He is compared to an overloaded donkey, which suggests that he quietly endures punishment without protesting, even when he does not fully understand what is expected of him. When the other boys were out at play, he stood wistfully by the window and gazed at the roofs of the distant houses. And if by chance he espied children playing on the open terrace of any roof, his heart would ache with longing. So while the other boys play and enjoy themselves, Phatik stands alone looking out of the window. He watches the distant houses, and when he sees children playing freely, he feels a deep sense of longing. He is physically present in the city, but emotionally he is disconnected from everything around him and he longs to be in his village. One day he summoned up all his courage and asked his uncle, "Uncle, when can I go home?" So at last Fateh gathers the courage to speak and he asks his uncle a simple but very important question: when he can go home. This question shows how strong his desire to return is. His uncle answered, "Wait till the holidays come." But the holidays would not come till November and there was a long time still to wait. So his uncle replies casually, telling him to wait for the holidays. But for Fatik, this is not a small wait. The holidays are still far away, and the idea of waiting that long makes him feel even more helpless. One day, Fatik lost his lesson book. Even with the help of books, he had found it very difficult indeed to prepare his lesson. Now it was impossible. So after that, there's another problem. He loses his lesson book. Even earlier, he struggled with his studies, and without the book, it became even more impossible for him to keep up with his studies. Day after day, the teacher would cane him unmercifully. So Fatik's condition continues to worsen. At school, he is beaten regularly by the teacher. The word unmercifully shows that there is no kindness or understanding, only punishment. His condition became so abjectly miserable that even his cousins were ashamed to own him. They began to jeer and insult him more than the other boys. He went to his aunt at last and told her that he had lost his book. Now he is in a very miserable state because even his cousins begin to feel embarrassed of him, and instead of helping him, they start making fun of him and insulting him. This shows how completely alone he is. He has no support either at home nor outside. Finally, he gathers the courage to tell his aunt that he has lost his lesson book. His aunt pursed her lips in contempt and said, "You great clumsy country lout, how can I afford, with all my family, to buy you new books 5 times a month?" So her reaction is harsh and dismissive. She calls him clumsy and insults him for being from the village. She also complains about the expense, suggesting that he keeps losing his books and is a burden on the household. That night, on his way back from school, Fatik had a bad headache with a fit of shivering. He felt he was going to have an attack of malarial fever. His one great fear was that he would be a nuisance to his aunt. So, on his way back from school, Fatik develops a headache and starts shivering. These are early signs of illness, possibly malaria, which was common at that time. Even in this condition, his main worry is not his health but that he might trouble his aunt. This shows how deeply he is afraid of being insulted and unwanted by his aunt. The next morning, Phatik was nowhere to be seen. All searches in the neighborhood proved futile. The rain had been pouring in torrents all night, and those who went out in search of the boy got drenched through to the skin. At last, Bishambar asked help from the police. The next morning, he is missing. Everyone is searching for him, but he cannot be found. The situation becomes more serious because it has been raining heavily all night, making conditions worse. Finally, Bishambar seeks help from the police. At the end of the day, a police van stopped at the door before the house. It was still raining and the streets were all flooded. Two constables brought out Phatik in their arms and placed him before Bishambar. He was wet through from head to foot, muddy all over, his face and eyes flushed red with fever, and his limbs all trembling. So by evening, Phatik is found and brought back by the police. The description of his condition is very striking. He is completely soaked, covered in mud, and burning with fever. His body is weak and trembling. This shows how much he has suffered. Bishambar carried him in his arms and took him into the inner apartments. When his wife saw him, she exclaimed, "What a heap of trouble this boy has given us. Hadn't you better send him home?" So Bishambar, his uncle, shows care and concern towards him. He lifts him up in his arms and he takes him inside the house. But his aunt's reaction is very different. Instead of feeling worried or sympathetic, she complains that he has only caused them trouble and suggests sending him back home. Phatik heard her words and sobbed out loud, "Uncle, I was just going home, but they dragged me back again." So Phatik hears his aunt's harsh words and they affect him deeply. He breaks down and says that he was trying to go home but he was brought back by the police. This shows that he had actually tried to escape and return to his village, but he was unable to do so. The fever rose very high, and all that night the boy was delirious. His illness becomes worse, and his fever rises very high. During the night, he becomes delirious, which means that he is no longer fully aware of his surroundings and he begins to speak in a confused manner. Bishambar brought in a doctor. Phatik opened his eyes, flushed with fever, and looked up to the ceiling and said vacantly, "Uncle, have the holidays come yet? May I go home?" So his uncle brings a doctor showing concern for his condition. In this state, Phatik keeps asking whether the holidays have come and whether he can go home. This question is very important because it shows that even in his illness, his strongest desire is to just return home. Bishambar wiped the tears from his own eyes and took Phatik's lean and burning hands in his own and sat by him through the night. So you can see that his uncle is deeply moved and he wipes tears from his eyes and stays by Phatik's side all night holding his hand. The boy began again to mutter. At last his voice became excited. "Mother," he cried, "don't beat me like that. Mother, I'm telling the truth." So Phatik continues to speak in his delirium. He calls out to his mother, begging her not to beat him and insisting that he is telling the truth. This shows that in his feverish state, how the memories of his past experiences are playing in his mind, how he was often misunderstood and punished even when he was not at fault. The next day, Phatik became conscious for a short time. He turned his eyes about the room as if expecting someone to come. At last, with an air of disappointment, his head sank back on the pillow. So the next day, he regains consciousness for a short while. He looks around the room as if expecting someone. This suggests that he is looking for his mother. When he doesn't see her, he becomes disappointed and he turns away, sighing deeply. He turned his face to the wall with a deep sigh. Bishambar knew his thoughts and bending down his head, whispered, "Phatik, I have sent for your mother." So his uncle understands what he is feeling and he quietly tells him that he has sent for his mother, so not to worry. The day went by. The doctor said in a troubled voice that the boy's condition was very critical. Phatik began to cry out, "By the mark, 3 fathoms, by the mark, 4 fathoms, by the mark." He had heard the sailor on the river steamer calling out the mark on the plumb line. So, as time passes, Fatik's condition becomes more serious. The doctor says that his situation is critical, which means that he may not survive. Fatik begins speaking in fragments. He repeats phrases that he has heard before, like the sailor calling out depths on the river. Now he was himself plumbing an unfathomable sea. The comparison here suggests that Fatik is now moving towards something unknown and deep, like an endless sea. It hints at his approaching death. Later in the day, Fatik's mother burst into the room like a whirlwind and began to toss from side to side and moan and cry in a loud voice. So later, his mother finally arrives. She is overwhelmed with emotion. She rushes in and begins to cry loudly and uncontrollably. Bishamba tries to calm her agitation, but she flung herself on the bed and cried, Fatik, my darling, my darling. Fatik stopped his restless movements for a moment. His hands ceased beating up and down. He said, Eh? The mother cried again, Fatik, my darling, my darling. Fatik very slowly turned his head and without seeing anybody said, Mother, the holidays have come. So Bishamba tries to calm Fatik's mother down, but she throws herself on the bed and she calls out to him with affection, calling him my darling and expressing her love for him openly. For a moment, Fatik becomes still, his restless movements stop, and he responds faintly. He slowly turns his head, but he is no longer fully aware. He cannot see or recognize her. Then he says, Mother, the holidays have come. This line is very significant because for Fatik, home and holidays represent peace, freedom, and escape from suffering. At this moment, it suggests that he feels he is going to his eternal home, not to his village, but away from all this pain. This marks the tragic end of the journey of Fatik's life. That was quite a poignant story, wasn't it? Poignant means something that makes us feel pity or sadness. Let's look at the main themes of this story. The first theme is alienation and the search for belonging. Alienation is a feeling of separation, of feeling like you don't belong anywhere. So Fatik experiences this feeling both in his own home and later in the city. At home, his mother treats him as a nuisance and favors his younger brother, which makes him feel unwanted. Hoping for acceptance and a better life, he goes to the city with his uncle, but things turn out to be even worse over there. His aunt resents him. That is, she feels angry and upset towards him from the very beginning. His cousins mock him, his teacher beats him for doing badly in his studies, and his uncle remains mostly indifferent. No matter where he goes, Fatik feels alone and rejected. This constant alienation creates a deep sadness in him and a strong longing for a place where he truly belongs. The second theme is parental love and neglect. One of the most important themes of the story is parental love and neglect. Fatik has a problematic relationship with his mother. He looks for warmth, affection, and understanding from her, but she feels irritated and resentful towards him. However, the story also shows that the mother is not entirely heartless. She is a widow, burdened with responsibilities, trying to manage her household and raise two children without any support. Both Fatik and his mother are troubled in their own ways, and neither is completely at fault. Tagore presents neglect not as cruelty but as something that can arise from exhaustion, hardship, and emotional distance. The next theme is adolescence and identity crisis. Fatik's behavior is closely connected to his stage of life. He is at an awkward transitional stage, moving from childhood to adolescence. He is mischievous, restless, and full of energy. Yet he is emotionally sensitive and insecure. He wants independence, recognition, and acknowledgement, but he has not yet learned how to express these needs maturely. Because his personality is very different from that of his obedient and quiet younger brother, his mother constantly compares him unfavorably, which damages his self worth. This inner confusion and lack of acceptance contribute to Phatik's emotional turmoil. Next theme is the tragic consequences of indifference towards children. The story highlights how a lack of understanding and emotional care can have serious consequences for children and adolescents. Phatik's emotional needs are ignored both at home and in the city. Instead of being guided or supported, he is punished, criticized, or dismissed. This emotional neglect gradually breaks his spirit and affects both his mental and his physical health. Tagore suggests that indifference towards a child's emotional world can be just as harmful as physical suffering. The next theme is the complicated mother son relationship. Tagore does not present the relationship between Phatik and his mother as warm or expressive. Their bond is natural and instinctive rather than openly emotional. Even though they frequently clash and misunderstand each other, the basic bond between a mother and child still exists. That is why when Phatik is lonely, sick, and unhappy, he longs for his mother above all else. Similarly, when his mother realizes that her son is dying, her buried maternal feelings surface strongly. This shows that even when love is not openly shown, it does not disappear. And the last theme we'll look at is the contrast between rural and urban life. The story presents a contrast between village life or rural life and city life or urban life. The village is shown as a place of freedom, open spaces, and natural surroundings, but the city, on the other hand, is cramped and emotionally suffocating for Phatik. Although the city is supposed to offer better education and opportunities, it feels like a prison to him. This contrast highlights that material advancement does not necessarily bring happiness. Phatik ultimately longs to return to the village, which he considers as his true home. Once we read this story, we are often tempted to look for a villain, someone we can blame for what happened to Phatik. Was it his brother who lied about him? Was it his mother who never showed him warmth or affection? Or was it his aunt who treated him unkindly? The answer is not so simple. Makhan behaved the way many children do. He lied to avoid punishment and to get his brother into trouble for what his friends had done. Phatik's mother was overwhelmed by his constant mischief and by the responsibility she carried as a widow. His aunt, already burdened with her own family, was never consulted before being asked to take responsibility for another child. While we can look back and reflect on what could have been done differently, it would be unfair to blame any one person. Phatik's tragic end is the result of a combination of attitudes, misunderstandings, emotional neglect, and unfortunate circumstances rather than the actions of a single individual. The title is simple but holds deep meaning. All Phatik ever wanted was to feel like he belonged in his home where he would be loved and wanted. He searches for this feeling with his own mother and brother and then in his uncle's home, but he never finds it until he goes to his eternal home. That is his final homecoming. So that was the explanation of the story. I trust you have understood it well. In case you found this video helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe and share it with your fellow students and friends. And I will see you in the next video.